for they were afraid. If you listen, just terror and amazement. Terror and amazement. And most modern scholars think that the authentic manuscript ends with they fled for they were afraid. And then later scribes who were uncomfortable with the somewhat anticlimactic and ambiguous ending added those last sentences. But I think that this ambiguity is actually the most powerful. Because if you're like me, you love a lot more ambiguous and something of a mixed bag. And that's really what Mark gives us in this gospel. They have Now, theologians have a fancy Latin phrase for this. Of course, there's always a fancy Latin or Greek phrase, right? So it's called a mysterium tremendum et fascinans. And basically what that means is a terrible and fascinating mystery. A terrible and fascinating mystery. And most theologians think that that's actually sort of the definition of turn away. And at the same time, something that's so captivating and attractive that you're utterly had at the tomb on the day of resurrection. And I think most of us, with the holy, something that was very mysterious, attractive, and somehow gave our life meaning. And all of the bits and pieces that didn't make sense suddenly came to make sense. So 1 year ago today was the day that my dad died in the ICU at Charlotte Hungerford Hospital. And we had been told on Friday, on Good Friday, that he was dying. And we were waiting for him to die. And I remember was awakened that morning, and I saw the terrible Easter Sunday. I have no idea if my dad is alive or dead. But I got a very nice message, text message. I checked my phone, and it was from Cosgrove, who said, "Brett, trust in the resurrection." And then I went back to bed, and I had a dream. But his head was at the foot of the bed, but he was dressed, he was in his bathrobe, and I could see his I said, "Daddy, are you seeing us?" And he said, his pet name for me. And I woke up, and of course I was terrified, but I was also amazed. Still with us, but he was waiting and wanting. Remove the blood pressure. Drifted away. Experiences like that, when we know that there is some deeper meaning, some grander plan at work that makes it all make sense. Amazement. There's another fancy Latin word, this mystery. And amazement. If you walked this journey in this past week, you know that we went from the high of Palm Sunday to the poignancy of the Last Supper with his disciples and the intimacy of washing their feet. And then the betrayal by one of his closest friends, the arrest, the trial, the humiliation, and ultimately the agonizing death on the cross. And it's utterly terrifying and utterly tragic. And in fact, the movement that it would be, they thought it was a political movement. That basically Jesus was going to be a kind of king that would take out the Romans. And the land of Israel would once more know. But instead, it was a transformation of human consciousness. And it was the awareness that underneath everything, there is a liberating and loving power that animates the universe and transforms even the worst catastrophe that they came to proclaim. But it took time. It took time. Now, you know I've been preaching Richard Rohr all of Lent, and that Richard Rohr's pattern for this spiritual progress, this spiritual journey, is called, he calls. And my friends, we have finally come to reorder and resurrection. And so I want to read resurrection and renewal are in fact the universal and observable patterns of everything. We might just as well use non-religious terms like springtime, regeneration, healing, forgiveness, life cycles, darkness, and light. If incarnation is real, then resurrection in multitudinous forms is to be fully expected. Love is the energy that sustains the universe, moving us toward a future of resurrection. We do not even need to call it resurrection for its work to be done. Resurrection, according to Richard Rohr, is built into resurrection is when I visited the California redwoods in Muir Woods. Has anyone ever been? Amazing. So there are these redwoods which are among the oldest years old. So those redwoods were there before Jesus and Moses. And they're enormous. They're like 20 to 30 most amazing and the holiest cathedral that I have ever been in my life. And as I was looking at these beings and imagining the trail, and there were tracks all along, and I came to this sign. Hundreds of years ago, a single large grew here. Then disaster struck. The trunk of the large redwood killed, perhaps by repeated and severe wildfire. From here you can see the original trunk still standing upright, now a dead and blackened snag. Despite such terrible damage, the tree did not die. Below the ground, its massive root system was full of vitality. Before long, hundreds of young, bright green girls the root crown of the original tree. To the full-size trees that today stand in a circle around the original. And I basically stopped in my tracks and nearly started bawling Because to me, that was the clearest proclamation of the gospel I think I had ever read. And I thought about my own life and all of the times that disaster has struck and I have just been burnt to the root. And to know that somehow there was a living vitality underneath. Part of faith. All of us have had the experience of being struck to the root. But if you can trust in the resurrection, in the living vitality, then we can live our lives with purpose and meaning and love. And so think about today, glimpses of vitality beneath the and amazement. Maybe it has to do with some kind of grief or loss. Maybe underneath the trauma. Or maybe it has to do with death and sensing a new vitality. Around 4:30 until the next day. But that afternoon, last year, was just a beautiful day. I don't know if anybody remembers, but it was a warm spring day. And I remember it was before dinner. My sister and I were planning to have a FaceTime for family members and loved ones. And she and her husband were going to cook a ham, and I had been given a ham by Father. He had delivered a ham to my doorstep, so I already had a cooked ham. And I just remember looking out the window, and of course it had been 3 weeks of just that there was just like this impressionistic kind of look to the whole backyard. And for the first time, there was a sense of peacefulness that settled on me. And I remember not really knowing why. And I called my sister, and for some reason we actually started laughing as we were preparing for this Easter dinner. And had a very nice Easter dinner by means of FaceTime as well as we could under the circumstances. And then later that week, I talked with a very close friend of mine who is a healer in Rochester, New York. And during the entire time that my parents were in the hospital, she was praying for them. She does remote healing, so I believe my dad as he passed and guiding my mom to a full recovery. And she told me a few days later, she said, I sensed that your dad gave me a gift on Sunday. That her daughters never give her any gifts. She has teenage daughters. And for some reason, they went to Home Depot that day before it closed. Rhododendrons in her backyard that she created in memory of all the people in her life who had passed on. And she said she planted them at the end. And I said, you know, my dad plumbing, he was good with electricity, but he did not like gardening, except he liked rhododendrons because I knew that my dad had given me a gift in the midst of all of that confusion, all of that doubt, and all of that pain. And I could say, he is not here, he is raised. In the name of God, Father, Son,